Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, and welcome to the Karey Carbaugh podcast, episode number 78. Buenas noches, damas y caballeros, chicos y chicas, niños de todas edades, y bienvenidos a el Karey Carbaugh podcast, episodio número 78. Welcome. My name is Karey Carbaugh, and this is the Karey Carbaugh podcast. Before we get started, if you would, smash that like button, like if you do, and let me know if you're tuning in live or catching this on the replay by dropping the word live or replay in the comments down below. And also, let me know where you're tuning in from. I always enjoy seeing where people are tuning in to these podcasts from, either live or on the replay. So let's dive into tonight's topic. As with most of my topics, I am aiming at helping people with their self-esteem and self-worth. And I think tonight's topic is going to be a particularly good one in this area. As you can tell from the title, I've titled this podcast, Can Suffering... Hang on, I want to make sure I get this right. I always come up with these podcast titles somewhat on the fly, and so I want to make sure that I get this right. Yeah, can sorrow or suffering become joy? Okay, I thought I had the whole thing here. Sorry about this. Can sorrow or suffering become joy, peace, or even hope? Can sorrow or suffering become joy, peace, or even hope? And we will see what I mean by that. On the surface, you might say, well, no, not really. How can sorrow become joy? How can suffering become joy or peace? But let's take a look at this a little more closely. As you may have noticed, I am a person with low vision and was reading my phone up close, so that's why I held the phone. If you noticed that I wasn't looking at the camera, that's why. I wasn't trying to be rude or ignoring the camera in any way. I've mentioned this on previous podcasts, but also in tonight's podcast in particular with this topic, I'm going to take a look from a Christian perspective. As I've explained, I am a Christian. I don't force that belief on anyone else, but I also don't hide it either. And I think with tonight's topic in particular, it's important to take this viewpoint in order to help us with our self-esteem. So, first of all, have you ever experienced sorrow or suffering? Me too. I think we all, if we've lived on this earth more than a few years, weeks, months, have experienced some form of sorrow or suffering. And that is a pretty universal thing, universal feeling, not specific to Christian believers or non-believers. But what I think is unique to the Christian belief is this idea of how can sorrow or suffering turn to joy, peace, or even hope. But first, what do we mean by joy? We've talked about this in previous podcasts, but the Christian view of joy is a little different than the worldly view. The worldly view of joy is more akin to happiness or excitement. If you're joyful about something, you're happy. But the Christian view of joy is more like peace or hope. The biblical idea of joy has more to do with the outcome and less to do with the immediate gratification or the immediate emotional state. This idea of Christian joy is more of a long-term concept. If you're living in Christ's joy, it's more of a hope for the future. It's more of a peace in knowing who is in control. And it's not us. I would like to reference a couple of scriptures, though I'm not going to read them. I'll give you the references and you can look these up on your own. The first one comes from the book of James, chapter 1, verses 2 to 4. And it talks about this idea of counting our suffering, our trials, as joy, because they become sources for hope, reliance on God. They can lead to perseverance. If everything is always positive, we don't necessarily learn to persevere. But it's through these trials, through these difficulties, that we learn to rely more heavily on God, or if you are not a believer, on whoever you believe in as the ultimate creator, as your creator. We humans are put on this earth for a very short time, a very finite time. So if we put our hope and our trust in things that are not of this earth, or rather, let's start with, if we put our hope and our trust in things that are of this earth, those things will fade away. If you're lucky, you might live to be 80, 90, or 100 years old. Maybe if you're really lucky, 105. I've known people that have lived to about 104, 105. Perhaps you might be very fortunate and live slightly longer. But even so, in the grand scheme of eternity, that's a very short span of time. So if we put our hope and our trust in things that are not of this world, things that will last for eternity, this is how today's trials and sufferings can produce the perseverance which can prepare us for eternity. As a believer, it can prepare us to be with God for eternity. As a non-believer, perhaps it's a preparation of a different kind. But nevertheless, believers, non-believers, we're all on this earth for a very short time. Let's also take a look, or you can take a look on your own. This topic came from a sermon, as many of them do, from this past Sunday at church. And this sermon was from the book of John, chapter 16. Shout out to Pastor Jason. He gave me 3 or 4 topics, 4 or 5 topics. I didn't count them before, but several topics that I'll be covering over the next several weeks. This one I thought was a good place to start with. In the book of John, chapter 16, the disciples are spending time with Jesus right before he goes to the cross. And he's explaining to them that in a little while he's going to go away and they will not see him anymore. But then, in a little while after that, they will see him again. And we have the benefit of looking back and knowing the end of the story as we look back on the beginning or the middle of the story. And we understand a little bit more about what Jesus was talking about. But at the time, the disciples had to have been quite confused. What do you mean you're going to go away for a little while and then you're going to come back? And then, when Jesus was crucified and killed, the disciples were in mourning. They had sorrow. They experienced sorrow. But it was through this sorrow that they eventually found joy, hope, and even lasting perseverance. I should have said they found joy. I forgot how I titled this podcast, the 3 words of the podcast. Joy, I want to get this right. Joy, peace, and even hope. So as Jesus was crucified and later raised, they found peace, as well as joy, and eventually hope. And the disciples eventually realized that if Jesus had not gone away, if somehow he had managed to stay here on earth forever, they would not have discovered their purpose of sharing his word. And it's through this discovery that they find their joy eventually, as well as their peace and their hope. And there's an example given in John chapter 16, which I think many of you may be able to relate to. As Pastor Jason said Sunday morning, and as I can attest to now, I've never experienced this personally, but for those of you who are females and following this, and have maybe had a child, you might know the experience of labor pains. And at the time, going through giving birth, so I've been told, that's not a particularly pleasant experience. But afterward, when you experience the joy of that child, I think most women would say that it was worth it. That through that pain and suffering, not necessarily sorrow, but through that suffering, eventually they found joy, peace, and even hope as they raised the child. So that's one example that I think we can relate to as humans, which Jesus actually brought up to his disciples. That through the pains, through the trials, if we persevere and endure, we can eventually find the joy, the peace, and even the hope to come. This is not a particularly easy topic because we do have to go through the difficulties. Once again, if you've experienced difficulties, you can probably relate to this, as I have. If you can, drop that word relate in the comments and let me know. I hope you're finding value in this topic. Do let me know with the word value. If you can't necessarily relate, but maybe you're getting value from this, I'd love to know that as well. So as we bring this in for a landing, I believe that pretty much covers the topic that I wanted to address tonight. We have some other topics coming up that are tied to this, which I believe are going to be very beneficial if you're a person struggling with self-esteem or self-worth. Maybe you're going through some difficult times. I know a lot of people right now are experiencing hardships, trials of sorts, with things going on around the country, around the world. So I hope that these topics will help ground you in some areas that might aid in your self-esteem and your self-worth through these difficult times. I'm looking to see if I have any comments. I don't see any comments to respond to. If I'm missing any, I will follow up with them afterward. But I do hope you've gotten value from this. And as always, I sincerely appreciate all of you and all of your support through these last now 78 episodes. It's only with your support, your continued following and commenting and hitting that like button, it's only through all of that that I'm able to continue persevering to do these podcasts. So I do hope you've gotten value from tonight. If you'd like to be added to my email list, where I can notify you of upcoming episodes and upcoming private events where we can dive into some of these topics a little more deeply, drop the word email in the comments and I will reach out to you to get your email address personally and privately without sharing that. I will respect your privacy and blind copy everyone on emails that are sent out. So let me know if you'd like to be added to that, and I would be most happy to add you to that email list, which I'm going to get rolling very soon for some of those of you who've signed up for that and haven't seen any emails yet. They will be starting very soon. So with that, I will let you all have your evening or your day back, depending on when you're watching this. And again, I sincerely appreciate your support. My name is Karey Carbaugh, and this is the Karey Carbaugh Podcast. Until I pop up either randomly or next week on another episode, make it a blessed day for those around you. Be a blessing to those you come in contact with this week. Have a great day. Goodbye for now.